Right, we're live.
And
After lots of technical haranguing, we've made it. Folks, welcome to a new episode of Common Sense Live. We've got a really interesting debate today. It's a scorcher. And I'm here, of course, with the lovely...
What's our twins? You called me lovely this time. Progress.
I always call you lovely.
Yeah.
No,
But anyway,
yeah,
I'm here. I'm back. I'm back and I'm better.
It's good to see. It's good to see you. It's been a very difficult week. There's a lot of things to talk about, folks. But we want to start off by just encouraging you to share the stream. So if you're listening to this live, tweet it out, put it on Facebook, share it with people because it was a tough news. It was a tough news week. Lots of emotional things. I have mixed emotions. Of course, we're out now from or we're in phase 2, if you like, now of the kind of roadmap to the irreversible roadmap to freedom. But at the same time, lots of events happen around the world that are cause for concern. Before we get into everything, guys, just to be very clear, this is a show where we bring in from perspective, different views. So if you're someone who enjoys listening to people who don't think like you, then I think you found a home today. We need you to get involved. So it's not just going to be a one-way street. Share your thoughts, share your ideas with us. Some of the topics we're debating may get tense and heated, but I think that's the whole point of democracy. We want those kind of conversations. So before we get into some of the topics, just literally comment now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from London? Are you watching from overseas, Manchester? And whilst you do that, how's your week been, Busai? What have you been up to? What did you get up to this week?
What have I been up to this week? What day is it today? It's Wednesday.
Today, it's a Wednesday. It's Common Sense Live on Wednesdays.
No, I know. But I meant, like, what is there to do? I walked around Oxford Street yesterday evening just to take in the air, just to see what it's like with other people breathing the same source of oxygen as me. Now that it's outside, I felt, why not? So that was nice to see people outside. A lot of people outside now that outside is opening. But I totally understand it. I feel you can see a sense of relief on people's faces and just joy to walk around. So that was fun to watch and to see. But other than that, I think recovering from last week, as you said, there's been a lot of tragedy. There was quite a few, at least 3 high-profile-ish deaths that happened last week. Obviously, on top of Prince Philip, there was DMX. For those of you who are hip-hop rap fans, I'm not sure if Mike recognizes that genre, but that's a really good genre. And Nikki, is it Graham? I'm not sure of her surname. She was
the Big Brother star.
And that's from anorexia. And I think that's one of those, I don't know, did you call it mental health? I don't know what category it actually falls under, but they say it's actually one of the most common ways people die. It has high death rate and it's not really spoken about a lot. So last week was quite hard actually. So I think it was only right that we started the week with April 12th. Roadmap.
So, out of curiosity, did you, when you went for your walk in Oxford Street, were there a lot of people outside as well?
Oh, a lot of people. Because number one, you can't eat indoors. So there was a lot of streets having their restaurants outside. But there were just people, you could just tell people had like small little Selfridges bag where there can't be anything in there apart from like a free lipstick. But you went to the shop to do that. Those small bags, there's nothing in there. And the woman asked you, or the man asked you, or whoever asked you, would you like a bag? And you're like, yeah, just to show people on the road. So there's quite a lot of people outside.
I ask you because I think Oxford Street is a perpetual super spreader event. There are so many people on that road. I would be shocked if you didn't catch something by the time you got to the train station, because there's something in the air there. There's something in the... I, on the other hand, went for a nice leisurely walk in my local park where people were socially distanced.
What park is it?
It's called Alexandra Park.
Oh, is it? Sounds like it's an exclusive park, exclusive members.
No, it's not. It's a local park. It's free. It's in Moss side actually. So equally, I was probably in as much danger as you were.
But I think ultimately, people, you could tell there was stuff in the air, but I think it's more about people's immune system being quite low anyway from not being outside. You could tell people getting the sniffles, and I was thinking, what's that?
It was a lot. There was a lot happening this week. We're going to go through every single one of it. Folks, keep commenting. We have a comment here from Torrin Joshua. He's from 061. Not sure what that is. Is that a cell number? Is it a phone number? What is it exactly? What's 0161? I'm not sure what 0161 is. Anyone who knows what 0161 is, let us know. Shall we go through the top stories this week? Let's start with the Prince Philip, which you spoke about already. I don't know who doesn't know about Prince Philip's death now, but if you're learning about it here, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break it to you. But I'm sure you must have seen it online, because actually it received the most complaints. And this is in terms of people complaining to the BBC because of the wall-to-wall coverage of Prince Philip's death. Of course, this happened on Monday, the 12th of April. The BBC received over 100,000 complaints about the coverage. And most were complaining because essentially they were tired of seeing this. It was interesting to me because when Prince Philip died, we had Boris Johnson saying straight away that the pint he was going to go for, he's not going to go for it anymore. He said the pint was irreversible, but then he did a U-turn. Typical Tories. I'm joking now. He did a U-turn and and he went for and he said he wasn't going for his pint. But when I saw people say EastEnders has been cancelled and Hollyoaks has been cancelled, that's when I knew, oh no, there's something's happening here. How do you feel when you hear that people are complaining about this war veteran's death being covered the way it is? I mean, do you take umbrage with them, or are you a bit like, suck it up, folks?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm one of those people who feel like if someone's dead and it means something to the powers that be, then you just have to understand that this was ultimately the King of England through marriage. So it's not actually a small thing, you know what I mean? It's actually not small as much as we have been far removed from that family. And again, about the controversy that's happened surrounding Meg and Harry, I do think.
Hold on, did you say Meg?
Yeah, Meg.
Are you part of her bridal shower or baby shower or what?
No, listen, Meg is what the tabloids refer to her. So I'm just regurgitating what I'm seeing. Meg, she's our people. She's part of the royal family. Yeah. Don't hate. Sorry, do you have a problem?
Well, no problem at all. I just found the fact that you're on short name basis.
Yeah.
So quickly.
No, mind your business. But nah. I feel like at the same time, it just shows again that people really have no connection with the royal family. Because I think if it was back in the day, we would have not gone to. I guess it was it a Friday? Yeah, you know what I mean? They would have not gone to school, but it happened randomly, I guess, so you can't really plan for it. But I understand why they did it, to be fair. I think ultimately someone's died. He's a member of the royal family, a senior member. What do you think?
He's a war veteran. I get that. But I guess, I don't want to read out Jeremy Corbyn's reply, but Jeremy Corbyn said, anyone who loses a family member, like many people have during COVID, it's a bad thing. I think people just go, well, listen, we've all lost people during this period. It's sad. Let's mourn. But to have all our shows cancelled and we only look at him and celebrate him is like, well, my uncle died, and I'm still grieving over that. So I'm really not interested in having a perpetual news cycle going on and on about one person's death when 130,000 people have died in the UK because of COVID.
I understand that, but I also feel like maybe the privilege we have is that we have other tablets and social media where I actually just curate my own entertainment. I didn't really see any of his coverage because I was looking at other things.
A lot of people still watch Hollyoaks.
Exactly. So it's unfortunate that
Line of Duty.
Oh, Line of Duty is amazing, but that's a different conversation. But I feel like ultimately, guys, if you wanted to watch something, you could watch something else. I don't really think it's not that deep.
Well, we pay the BBC license fee, so it is that deep for some. They're paying for this coverage, and they want to watch their Hollyoaks, Posayo. But anyways, let's move on to something that's a bit more that's going to bring us together. It's the Green Seal scandal, and that's a misnomer in some parts because you go, is it really a scandal? Again, on the 12th of April, Boris Johnson launched an independent investigation into David Cameron's lobbying efforts. David Cameron had been texting different government ministers in an attempt to lobby them to increase Green Seal's capital's access to government-backed loans. This is obviously a problem because he sent a message to Rishi Sunak. He met with the Health Secretary, Matthew Hancock, And he's just literally using his connections to power to try and lobby these different ministers. And the reports are saying he was trying to get almost 60 million from them. I mean, the connection here is after David Cameron left office, he then joined Greensill Capital as an advisor. So he's got close links to this part. Listen, if I was reading this out and I didn't say David Cameron, some people would go, "This is Nigeria, isn't it?" And you go, "No, it's in the UK. It's happening on our shores." When you read this, Messiah, what did you think?
I'm not gonna lie. I think in the beginning I was like, this is how they operate on every level. This is not a new story. I felt wow, but then immediately after I felt I shouldn't. Things are still wrong just because I'm used to them, And there's that bit of like, actually, this is how the system was. Doesn't mean we should support it. But ultimately, it's more about a reality check for everyone else to say this is how people get to the places they are. More often than not, it's through networks. It's always been like that. But I think it seems like a moral I guess a moral hazard here, or moral argument because of it's the government. They're supposed to be the morality, the epicenter of what you're supposed to do. So I think that's the only thing it is. But I think people don't really have an understanding of how politics works and understand the actual relationship between the private sector and the government. It's always been like that. That's how everyone does it.
Yeah, but what makes this kind of really shocking is just how overt it is. I think it speaks to David Cameron's arrogance in some part because, of course, you have lots of soft power in politics where you make friends, with people, you say things without saying them. That's a well-established thing in politics. But David Cameron, outright, is just meeting for drinks and literally texting Rishi Sunak, the current chancellor, knowing that the guy can screenshot things. We live in an era of receipts. All the guy had to do was just kind of, tweet it, send it over to, some through back channels to some publication, and this would have got out. But the fact that he wasn't even covering these tracks speaks to the arrogance of just thinking, I can just do anything I want. And David Cameron, he's always had that vein. Just does whatever he wants with his shiny suits and his slicked hair, whatever you call it. I wasn't shocked, but I was disappointed. He could have at least tried to cover it up.
I just feel like I think with the Greensill incident, it's because they went bust. If I'm correct, last year, and that's why it's seen as like a failed attempt. But ultimately, I would argue whether Tony Blair or other prime ministers covered their tracks. I think because of how lucrative those deals had been, there would be no reason for any of the information to have come out. With this situation, it came out clearly because it wasn't successful. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't really think it's about covering tracks. I genuinely feel as though like the arrogance is in the fact that why would someone text someone not thinking that they're going to get the response that they needed? Do you know what I mean? It's the ability to text rather than it being seen. And it makes you wonder, why do you have each other's phone number? But anyway, what's that about? So what else? What was the messages before this message? Probably a Brexit message. No?
I don't want to go. I don't want to speculate.
Oh, you don't want to speculate, Mike, because this is your party. Yeah, sorry. When it's Labour, we'll speculate. Don't worry, when it's Keir Starmer, we'll speculate. I remember.
I'm not a Conservative Party member. I'm not. Folks who know me well. Not interested in the Conservatives. But nor am I interested in Keir Starmer. I am what you call politically homeless. And so if anyone has a home for me, then please let me know. And I will join you right there. The last story, and we should put a trigger warning out because we're going to be discussing death and manslaughter as it's been seen here, is of course of Dante Wright. And folks, if you want to know the story in full, we've covered it on Common Sense on Editor's Desk. Sorry, so on the same channel, if you just click to the uploads, you can see the video where we covered what happened just a few days ago in America. It happened 10 miles from where the trial for Derek Chauvin, the man who knelt on George Floyd's neck, where that happened. And essentially, this story is super sad because it a 20-year-old man who died. He was a father, so he had a child. And essentially, and we'll show you the image in a minute. In fact, maybe we should show the image first. I don't know if we have the image ready, folks. if it's not ready, I can talk about it really quickly. But I think it's one of those things you have to just see it yourself, and then we can talk a bit about it before we go into our main debate. I'm literally speaking slowly to see if the producers have the videos ready. Please let me know if it's ready. Superb. Well, let's cut to the video then, if that's okay, Torin. It's really sad stuff. And what you're seeing here is the body cam footage of the woman who would go on to fire shots at this man. They've stopped him here. Okay, that's him trying to get away. And she yells out, you can't hear. She yells out, taser, taser, taser. Apparently, she thought she was holding a taser, but she was actually shooting him with live rounds. Car gets away, and the car crashes into another car. And of course, he's found dead because of the bullet wounds. I mean, she says it was an accident, that she meant to fire a taser. I mean, watching this, what do you think?
It's painful. Honestly, it's just, you know what it is? It's just ultimately someone has died. Do you know what I mean? I think that's what it is. It's ultimately someone has died, and I think there takes a certain level of humility, at least, for police officers to recognize that. And I think in their bids to try and alleviate themselves of responsibility and accountability, they forget someone's dead. And they don't seem as sad as they're supposed to. They almost seem as, look at me, I'm innocent, rather than going, I'm also grieving with this situation that's happened. And I think that's the bit where I can't understand it. You know, whether it's a mistake or not a mistake, that is literally up to the details of the conversation. But it's always spun as to say it's his death versus someone else's innocence, and it's not. And I think that's the bit that always upsets me the most.
Yeah, it's super sad, and like I said, we've covered it, so folks can, if you want to find out more about the story, you can check it out on Ed's desk. I mean, there's so many things that frustrate me about the story. One is the fact that the police are still self-regulate. That's a problem. You know, one of your police officers does something, and then you go back to the police to go, was that a problem? Well, of course they're going to say no. And we have all these stories. We also saw a lieutenant not too long ago. It went viral on social media. He was being pepper sprayed by some police officers. He was telling them, I don't know what's going on. He has his hands up. He clearly wasn't a threat. And they were pepper spraying him. And he said stuff like, I'm scared. And the police officer says, you should be scared. And all these kind of weird things. You go, what's going on here? Now, here's the thing. That happened 3 months ago. The police officer was just fired now. Why was he fired now? Because it went viral on social media. So we've seen patently, right, demonstrably, that when the police have to actually self-regulate, they just can't be trusted to do it. You need citizen-controlled boards that can review police action and go, hold on a minute, this is wrong. But also, there's the whole thing just smells, right? Why? Because the guy's been stopped because apparently he had air fresheners hanging from his rearview mirror. That's what he was stopped for. That's what he was stopped for. So he's stopped for that, right? And then who gets out of the car? 3 different police officers with guns and tasers. And then he comes out, right? And then they try to handcuff him. And then he tries to get away. And then clearly no weapon. They can see his hands. He tries to get in the car. And then she goes, oh, it was a mistake. She pulls out a gun and then she just shoots him. Now, here's what's really sad about it. Not only has she been in the force for 26 years, she was also apparently training someone. Like, she trains people. So imagine you're going around kind of showing people how to police. And on every single count, this is just terrible policing. Excessive force. You're needlessly aggravating the situation, and you seem to have lost your ability to de-escalate situations. Exactly. All these videos I watched, the police make it worse. Exactly. Shouting for no reason, pointing guns when the guy's hands are up. Like, what do you want from him?
Exactly. I just feel like even in the car, whether it was a taser or not, why did you need to taser him? He's in the car. He's inside the car. Where's he going to go? There's 3 of you. Go to the other exit if needs be. Like, some things I feel like you've killed somebody. And I think police sometimes forget, on top of the killing someone, you're wearing a body cam. I don't understand. Is this you saying, I'm finna kill you with all the, like, then what do we do? Because I think this is a conversation that probably from time to time it keeps coming up. What do we do about these police? About police in general? Is it a case of too much power to people who are imperfect and probably trigger happy sometimes? Or even if not trigger happy, undertrained, and they always feel like they're threatened? This can't go on, whether it's institutionally something or not. It seems like police aren't well trained or equipped to handle both the emotional and physical and legal requirements to keep our countries, keep our world safe. So what do we actually do?
I agree. In the case of the lieutenant, it literally felt as though the police officer was living out some fantasy, like the kind of powerful, man in charge fantasy, where someone's on their knees and you're still spraying pepper spray at them. No, they're not a threat to you, And there's a lot that needs to change, of course, but I think the pathology of policing right now, it's just rotten. And I guess what makes me sad is that it feels as though you need, like, and maybe I don't want to get into all the numbers, but from the ones I've seen, when I see Black people dying, it feels as though you have to have a viral moment in order for cases of injustice to be taken seriously. And so essentially, Black bodies have to rely on, one, Black people having the kind of energy to kind of keep sharing these images and keep sharing it. Two, charitable guilt from white people who go, I'll share it as well because, it's a bad thing. So literally, you have to rely on those two things in order to get justice. One, Black people who are tired of this happening over and over again, having the willingness to continue sharing. I mean, we saw someone say it, that it was traumatic to watch that video, and it is traumatic. But to think, if it doesn't go out, then nothing happens. Typically, here's the worst thing that happens. These police officers, sometimes they'll resign, they'll move and join a different precinct and just carry on. And to think some of these people have been serving for 20 years, that means they become emboldened, which means, guess what? They've probably done this God knows how many times. There's no video. So anyways, let's not get too much into it. It's really sad. But I read just not too long ago that she's being charged with second-degree manslaughter. We don't know what's going to happen with that, but we'll keep watching the story. Let's move on to domestic issues here in the UK, and that's of course of COVID passports. Now that's why some of you have joined. Our stream last week was all about students, and one of the students who was on that stream actually confessed today to having multiple people over as we speak. I won't say his name, but I think I was right in my assertions. But what we're going to talk about now is, as we slowly come out of lockdown, a key part of this might be COVID passports. These are COVID identification schemes, is the technical name. And they're schemes where to access certain large gatherings or large events or, all sorts of different things like traveling, you have to present your identification, right? Showing that you don't have COVID or you've had a negative test, or you've contracted and come back from COVID. And this is meant to ensure that those events be secure and the events can carry on. We're going to get some great guests on in a minute. Just want to get some quick thoughts from Basile before we bring on our guest. When you think COVID passports, literally, in a word or two, what do you think? Are you kind of support them, don't support them?
I understand the appeal of them.
All right. Well, let's see. Let's see if Hamish, who's a student, will be as understated as Basile was just. Hamish, COVID passports.
I think they're good. I think we kind of need them personally, just because I find that, we need some form of identification to prove that you've had the vaccine or you've had a negative test. It's like going to a club with an ID card to prove you're over 18, right? You can't go up to the bouncer and say, I'm over 18. How do I prove it? You need sort of like an ID card of sorts. So in that sense, I would say I support vaccine passports or COVID passports, whatever they're called. And in that sense. So I also find
Yeah.
they protect the community in that sense as well.
But when you say it's like having ID cards when you're over 18, when you're over 18, you're typically doing over 18 stuff. So you're going to do things that are deemed as adult things. But COVID passports aren't for adult things. Going to the theater isn't an adult thing. You know, going to certain parks isn't an adult thing. Going to a concert isn't an adult thing. So how is it comparable?
Well, because you need some sort of something to prove. Let's say you're over 18, or just something to prove that you've had something, like you prove to go into a thing. Because I find that, especially the fact that we know that large gatherings cause huge spikes of cases, we need to understand that whoever has the actual, who has the vaccine, especially the fact, and like a passport or of something of that kind would actually prove that, that I would say. That's why I'm saying it. Yeah.
I understand. I expect you to say that. Of course. Let's bring on Aaron. Aaron, what are your thoughts? What do you want to add to this conversation?
I mean, me and Hamish had a discussion about it. I think it was yesterday and on Tuesday or Monday. And fundamentally, I believe that that passports are equal. I think it's all actually from a fascism in the name of health. I think that the idea of you needing a certain vaccine or a certain health status to be able to access, normal things like theaters or pubs or whatever. I'm a fan of that. In a way, is a discretion.
We're struggling to hear you a bit,
why
Aaron.
a person stages.
Hello. We're struggling to hear you a bit, so we'll bring Aaron back on when we can hear him properly. Hamish, Basayo, I saw you kind of chuckling there. What what do you think?
It's been the same line of argument for a couple episodes, isn't it, about suppressing liberties or rights or qualifying people to do certain things that was our previous normal. But whether we believe in the COVID, death rates or not, or how it was handled, I think it's a health risk to people, right? And to prevent that, it needs to protect the majority, whether that means going against what groups of individuals think. I think realistically, how do we stop a spike like this happening again or being able to contain it? It's going to have to be something that seems quite quote unquote fascist, depending on your interpretation of fascism. Now, if fascism, which obviously has very serious connotations, is in this context supporting the greater good, or at least designed to help the greater good, and we can understand why, and potentially there might be conditions attached to it, like for a particular time period. If you want to travel within the next 2 years, where they won't be able to necessarily contain the virus, or it's still quite new in terms of whether it's been able to mutate and a vaccine response to it, then I understand it, because they're not saying forever. But we don't know the conditions attached to it.
So I want to ask you this then, and I guess, Aaron, you can weigh in on this too, is...
Can you hear me now?
The issue, we can hear you, Aaron. The issue is, how are we meant to trust the government when to enforce this vaccine passport? And of course, they say vaccine passport, but the issue is, once you have a health card, which is what it is, other things can be added onto it, right? Have you also taken this jab? Have you taken that jab? And the idea is that there is a slippery slope that can ensue. But here's the point I want to make. How are we meant to trust the government when we just learned that 23% of the numbers from people who died from COVID actually didn't die from COVID? And we're being told that the numbers may be like almost like quarter of the deaths may be actually wrong, because the government has been conflating who dies from COVID and who dies with COVID. So if you have COVID and then you come back and then you get hit by a car, COVID death. We weren't aware of this. So you've got a government that seemingly is massaging the figures, seemingly is controlling the public mood, and then we're expected to allow them to control essentially identification cards, which already there was no appetite for. No, can you understand why people may be nervous and say the government should not have this power? Because if they do something wrong, it will have drastic ramifications on ordinary bodies.
100%. I think this is no doubt any side of the argument. For me, I understand it. It's not because if you're for or against, I don't understand. I think people did know. I mean, it wasn't a public conversation, actually, depending on how much people followed it as well. There's the element of responsibility that I don't think people took with the vaccination conversation of COVID-19, because it was a very much self-help you know, almost social experiment that's went on. You have to research it yourself. You're not going to access it easily from BBC. You have to figure out what's happening as well. So I think it's a privilege as well. Of course, those of us who are maybe more engaged or have devices to keep up with it. But it's a slippery slope as well on the reverse. If you can't trust the government with vaccines, then we can't trust the government with anything. So let's all just riot now, which I'm not against. But to say you're specifically not against the government on this, and then everything else, you still pay your taxes, but the taxes have gone to places that you shouldn't have gone to either.
Yeah, but that's
very
different.
selective for me.
That's different.
I don't think it is, because you're using a misinformation or omission of information to say this is why I don't trust this, which is fair enough. But then to act on that. Whereas in other places where there's always been so many cases of government misusing funds, and you haven't been like.
But it's different because it's a different scale. You have to recognize we are in a time period, where we've never been in as a country. The government in the last year have had power like we've never seen before. They've shut the whole country down. This is not the same as someone having the Sea Hill situation with someone handing a government loan to a friend. Yeah, these are all bad. But right now we're talking about giving this government unfettered power, right? And as Keir Starmer said, he said, well, this may be against the British instinct, because already we saw this kind of argument come back and forth during the debate about the ID cards. Aaron, when you think about the government trust, I mean, does it sit easy with you, government having this amount of power?
Well, I mean, no, it doesn't. I've never been a fan of any government's total control, because then it shatters the idea of democracy. The answer to your question, are COVID passports Unbritish? We kind of have to answer, what does it mean to be British in the first place? So I read this interesting piece from the London School of Economics by a lady called Lucinda Platt, her name is, and she said that there are certain fundamental aspects of British values. Wait, I'm gone big again.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay,
you're fine.
cool.
Continue.
There are basic British values that are expected in all levels of society, and they should be taught in schools and expected of adults. These values include democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance of those with different faiths and beliefs. So a key element of her analysis includes individual liberty. So while it's reasonable for laws to be in place to prevent crime and these kind of stuff, it's clear the UK should be as egalitarian, allowing for citizens to be free to make their own decisions, and that for the autonomy as well. If a person does not want to take a vaccine for whatever their reason, maybe religious, philosophical, health, whatever, they should not have to. Force takes more than one form. Force doesn't necessarily mean the police are going to come to your door and beat down your door and forcibly inject you like you're a guinea pig. I'm talking about things like
do that. They're not.
But no, I'm saying that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing. I'm saying any consequence whatsoever, as in you can't go to the pub because you don't have this. I was reading an article today in the Telegraph where there was an elderly man who had his vaccine, but because he was not as tech savvy, the pub refused him access because he does not have a smartphone, which verifies him to go into the pub. Bear in mind, I think he's 79 years old and he lost his wife a couple of years ago. So in a way, you could argue it opens up a question of not just about health, but about discrimination in general. Are people who are not as tech savvy, for example?
That's one of the major worries, discrimination. Hamish, I mean, what are your thoughts now? You don't have any problem with that?
Okay, so right, you know what? Aaron definitely has raised a good point about the whole tech savvy stuff, which I have to admit, it's an important conversation to have in terms of like, well, but some people might not have a phone, right? So you have to have like actual physical papers in that sense to actually show the intent and having like the vaccine passport. The thing is, I'm just annoyed by a lot of people. I'm not saying I'm annoyed with Aaron bringing up this point about individual liberty and stuff, but I just find like, surely, I'm sorry, like no man or no person is an island, quite frankly, right? You can have all, you can have all the freedom you want, but quite frankly, you are absolutely pointless if you haven't got a community around you, quite frankly. And I find that we can't have like unlimited freedom all the time, because that then ends, people's lives, quite frankly. And I find that, this is what annoys me as a lot. It's like people saying, "Oh, but it's my right. I can decide if I want to have the jab or not." Yet you deciding not to have the jab means I could get infected by you not taking the jab, and someone else could die from it. Do we really want to take that risk? You know,
Go
that's
on,
how I
Aaron.
feel in that
No,
sense.
no, I don't. I think we're getting a little bit confused here. Obviously, there's no such thing as 100% total freedom. That's called anarchy. No one has 100% freedom, and there are laws in place to enforce that. What we're speaking about here is the idea that your freedoms hang in a balance where the government gets to decide, okay, this is your freedom, and we have the power to give it back to you if you do this. As in, the freedoms are not ours by default. We decide who can do what based upon whether you have a vaccine. So essentially, your right to bodily autonomy means absolutely nothing. It's practically forced through the back door, if that makes sense.
Can I just say something? Sorry, I understand. Again, I totally understand the reservations, and don't get me wrong. I don't think the word trust with the government, they don't go together. I totally understand you, but at the same time, I feel as though we forget how democracy works. Sometimes it's not just because we are individuals that we all get to determine it. We vote in people because of how we feel like they can analyze and interpret laws and see the world. And therefore, we say we want your logic and your intelligence and your wisdom to lead the country, because we cannot go through every document, every paper, every tooth and nail of the society and rule it ourselves. That doesn't mean that should they introduce something we can't fight back, that is our right. However, this type of decision making is the way we live our lives naturally. And this is why I'm so confused as to kind of the selective desires of liberty and self-governance. I agree. We all of us, even those people who are open to it, have reservations. And that's why we are saying, if we see the conditions attached, if we know how this is rolled out, if it has maybe a time frame, then maybe we could firm it for a certain period of time. But again, at the same time, we know that there's a tendency for governments to have ulterior motives. That doesn't mean that anything they do now, we should really be like, there's no reason in it. And I think it's kind of it's kind of dishonesty, intellectual dishonesty for us to say democracy. That's not what democracy is. Democracy isn't us not agreeing and then not happening, because how do you know the majority don't agree with the vaccine passports? And if by voting we vote it in, well, what would you then say?
So there's just a couple of points on what you just said, Basayo. So in terms of people disagreeing with the vaccine passports, you've actually seen probably the most widespread bipartisan support pact I would say I've seen in like recent political history, to be quite frank, where a cross-party group of MPs and peers, over 70, including ex-leader of Labour, ex-leader of the Liberal Democrat, ex-leader of the Conservative Party, saying that this thing is actually going to be it's going to be discriminatory in its use, right? And the idea that the COVID status certification may, unfortunately empower unscrupulous people who already, are looking to demonize certain groups. I think the reason and where I think I disagree with what you're saying, Basayo, is, and to a certain degree, Hamish, is I think we're not treating this situation uniquely. And I think it is a unique situation because the vaccine, this isn't a theoretical debate about whether you want to, carry an ID card out or not. This is whether you want to take the vaccine and then have proof of the fact you've taken it to engage in some public life in a way that we used to engage before. So there's a number of things happening here. There's folks who may not want to they want to take the vaccine, and they don't even need to give a good reason for it. You might just not want to take the vaccine. And in a democracy, the point Aaron's making is, if you don't want to take the vaccine, that's your prerogative. People don't take it because of religious reasons. I know folks who say that, I want to pray about the illness I have, and I want to wait it out, and you may think that's daft, but that's their prerogative. If they want to do that, hold on, they can do that, right? By enforcing a vaccine passport, which says that for them to be able to take part in normal, nominal kind of British life, they have to do something they weren't doing before, right? That may be against their conscience. That is a unique affront on their civil liberties. It isn't some nebulous debate about liberty. This is a new encroachment on their liberties.
100%, but is this virus and our experience for the last 1.5 years a unique situation? It is. So this is why I don't understand. And I get what you're saying about what Aaron was saying about, there's reasons why. And I think myself and Hamish have both said we understand why there's reservations. We actually understand why people might not want to take it. And we're not saying it should happen. What we are saying is that the logic behind it is very understandable. But the rollout and the way it happens, well, for me, I don't want to speak for Hamish the whole time, but the way it happens, we have to so finely done that we do not cross these boundaries that we are so scared of. I'm not saying I want it. I'm saying I understand
what would be your boundaries, Basayo?
I think in terms of, as you said, like making sure about in terms of certain discrimination, there's things to do with like employment, there's things to do with accreditation, there's things to do with religious rights and encroaching on those, other health issues. I think, and even in terms of maybe age as well, when you think actually, if I'm amongst my age group or certain non-people who, if we do contact it, they might not be severe. There are certain things where I'll understand. But again, I don't know, and I don't want to pretend like I actually know all the barriers towards this conversation.
No, but my question is how could you roll this out without religiously discriminating?
No,
it's impossible.
I don't think it's impossible because just like we have religious schools, right? Or we have other situations where religious people are not exempt, but there's certain ways that they go about it where it's like, okay, cool. Because from what I read, this is a particular conversation, but from what I read, there's actually other 3 criteria, right? In terms of actually having a negative test if you want to travel within a certain amount of time, which is still quite a short amount of time, but it's still possible to do if obviously capacity increases or if something else happens where you're exempt. So technically the conversation we're having isn't the real conversation at hand. It actually isn't what we're put up with. And I think we have to be careful that in being fearful of what's going to happen, we don't have a conversation about something that they're not planning to do. We have to understand.
No. I would say that's a misrepresentation. And Aaron, I'll default to you in a minute because right now we're talking about potential COVID vaccines for say the pub, right? That's not scaremongering. If that does happen, right? If it happens in the future, or for theaters, if it happens in the future, to be quite frank about it, you cannot go into the theater unless you have a COVID, unless you have a passport that says, quote unquote, you've had that just tells you your COVID certification. There is no way around. I mean, are they going to have an exemption for if you're a Christian? You don't have to have.
No, but I'm saying the thing I'm trying to tell you is that we don't know the details, right? So we can't debate what exactly the conditions are because we don't know them. What we can do is speculate. Is there a case where to make society, I guess, a place where it's free of, or not free of, but at least to the point we can be as safe as possible for everyone, that there might be ways and certain instances where you want to show proof that you are not a danger to the public or vulnerable to the public in a certain way. And again, that doesn't mean that everyone needs to take the vaccine. People might voluntarily be like, I want to take the vaccine, and that's enough. It might be a certain capacity where there's enough people who don't take the vaccine or take the vaccine, but everyone else can be free. I don't know, so I can't debate those details. What I am saying is that to throw out all the logic because of the fear is daft. It's quite daft in my opinion.
But I think to also call it fear is I think that's
fear.
also
It is fear because it hasn't happened.
It's not. Go on, Aaron.
I would say that respectfully, to call it fear is to gaslight people and to trivialize their legitimate concerns. In a way, this idea of a vaccine on passport is similar to, it's basically a soft version of China's almost like a social credit scheme where the government gets to decide based upon how you live your life, what rights you should be able to have and what you don't have. So for example, in China, I've heard where if you have a certain kind of credit score, you are able to say, jump the queue in terms of like waiting for a train or things like that. Normal things like that, being able to, the government now has some kind of healthy morality of you saying, if you live your life like this, you now have access to certain things based upon our standard of morality. We now get to decide if you're healthy in this manner, then you get to have this. So we get to choose what people should have based upon their own health. There's no way you can get around that without discrimination. There's no getting around it. It's simple as that. People call it fear mongering, but it's happening right in front of our very eyes. There's no getting around that. It's discrimination or it's not. There's no middle ground here. There's no grey areas.
Let's bring in Hamish. Go on, Hamish.
You know what? This conversation really reminds me a lot about face masks and when they came into first play. I find you can actually have a card that literally says, I can't wear a face mask because of a health reason or because of such and such, right? why can't we do something similar where we do this, you know, COVID passports, where we say, look, I can't have this COVID passport because of religion, which I don't actually know the specific reasons why you would not want to take a vaccine because of religious reasons, and I'm actually open-minded to actually understand that reason, because if someone knows that, that'd be great, or health reasons or whatever. But if you don't want to take the vaccine because, I don't know, you just don't want to take the vaccine, I actually think is incredibly selfish, in my personal opinion, because I feel like you actually are going to harm other people. And quite frankly, you know, I think personally, this country is way too obsessed about ourselves and about our rights and about our own viewpoints, in my honest opinion. Personally, that's how I feel about it. And I just find you know, that's how I feel. I find we need to be more of it.
I totally agree with you, Amish, on the fact, on your freedom to think it's selfish. That's okay. I think in a liberal democracy, we should all have the freedom to say, I think that's selfish. I think this is bad. I think this is good. However, when legislation is based on that feeling you have that it's selfish, I think that's when that's when the problem arises. And what we're debating here isn't the specifics. We're not getting to the specifics per se, but the idea of passports, right? And how we've seen them popularly displayed in the media, this notion that you would have to present your certification before. I mean, we've seen, just as of yesterday, 341,000 people, almost 342,000, signed a petition saying do not roll out COVID-19 passports. And the fear is that it will be used to restrict the rights of people who have refused a COVID vaccine for all sorts of different reasons. We're conceding here the fact that for folks who, can you guys hear me? I think Basayo's we've lost Basayo.
It's just Basayo. I can hear you.
Right.
Yeah.
For people who maybe, you know, don't want to take it for religious reasons, have some health complications, we're kind of hoping that they'll be looked after, right? And so that's kind of not being said. But here's the point: I should not be deprived of things I used to do, right, freely, because you think the way I'm behaving now is selfish. It's like, okay, that's your feeling, but you can't tell me I can't do what I used to do because now there's this new thing I have to do that then causes my civil liberties. If you're creating new things and you're saying to do these new things, you have to have a COVID passport, fair. But you can't tell me that the pub that I've been going to for 20 years, I suddenly can't go anymore until I have essentially a health card that tells people about my health status. Also, do you not see the slippery slope here, which is that once you can have a card that displays your health certification, why can't you add other things to it? Whether you have diabetes, or why can't you add to it?
I don't think it gets that situation.
Why? But these things happen. These things happen.
No.
It starts small. It's the idea that your freedoms depend on something, as if you're not free by default. That's the issue here. The fine line. What you're talking about before about how, you know, why should people not have to? Why can't you have exceptions to the rule? The exception should be. I don't think there should be any exceptions. I don't think so. The rule should be: I'm free by default. If I choose not to take a vaccine, that's my prerogative. Most people have chosen to take the vaccine. We've had over 30-odd million people taking the vaccine. All the groups have been taking the vaccine. People who are over the age of 50, people who are in care homes and their carers, and the immunocompromised, such as myself. I'm type 1 diabetic. Now it's just people who are under that age now. The rest. That's probably just over half the country. So most people, in that sense, in terms of addressing your fear about being selfish and stuff, most people are taking the vaccine. Most people do have the common sense, pun not intended. But the idea is that if a person does not want to take a vaccine, they should not feel coerced into doing it, because there's a fine line between coercion and cause and effect. There's a fine line between saying, okay, well, you know, if you don't take the vaccine, then it means that you can't do this, that, the other, because that's essentially blackmail. That's kind of what the gangsters and mafias do. They say, if you don't pay my money by this time, then nothing will happen. This is the kind of language they use, basically. It's the implication that things will get worse, or there are certain things that you won't be able to do anymore, almost like a sort of social credit system. based upon the government.
I want to
you know?
consider some of the thoughts that we're getting in the chat, just to acknowledge some of the commenters. We've got someone saying here, this is Torrin, he says that it's a subtle way for the government are pushing us into taking the vaccine. What if we don't want to? We don't just want, we just want to be able to do normal things that some people can if they have the passport. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry, we just won't be able to do some normal things. I totally get where you're coming from. We've got Jamie McLaren here who says we were aware. It's been common knowledge that the numbers are counted based on whether people have died, had a positive COVID test within 28 days of death. Someone else says here, I think this is Aaron here. Aaron says, it will create a health class system. People who take the vaccines will be seen as morally superior to people who don't. It's a soft version of China's social credit. So I forgot what you said at the end, but we get the gist there. Well, the interesting thing, gents, whilst we wait for Beside to come back, is the British public does seem split, and based on where you pay attention to, you get different metrics. So I read to you this petition with over 342,000 people, but if you take a look at the Impus Mori poll, when it comes to traveling abroad, 78% of the folks they polled said that they supported some sort of kind of COVID status identification. When it came to visiting relatives in hospital, some folks said, about 74% who also said that they thought it was a sensible idea. When it came to kind of going to care homes, you saw something like 78%. So is it the case then that perhaps it's inevitable that we'll need to kind of have some sort of COVID status identification? However, we need to reserve it for places like going to the hospital, traveling abroad, going to kind of care homes, but leave it out for stuff like going to the theater, going to the cinema, going to football games, going to the pub, for instance. What are our thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the thing. So I want to have a bit more of a nuanced opinion about these passports and stuff. I would only want these passports in place if, it's only for let's say these massive gatherings, right? Let's say traveling abroad, for example, or going to, a football stadium which has 60,000 people, for example, right? Like a really big chance of causing huge spikes. I don't want it to go to the extent of pubs, personally, right? That's what I am arguing for. I'm not saying I want, everyone to have to show these passports everywhere they go, because I think that's ridiculous, personally, right? So that's why I will agree with, both of you on that, and stuff like that. So I find, and also the fact the whole two-tier system, I am worried about that. It's both have been saying that. I find that if we are wanting to avoid that, then we need to increase access to vaccines, and we also need to push down the message. I'm not saying persuade people, because I agree with you, Aaron, about that point about persuading people, not forcing coercion in that sense. Spreading information about these vaccines, about the fact that they do reduce transmission and they do reduce the effects of COVID. And so that can actually allow more people to then understand, right, I understand why I want to take the vaccine. So I think it's a mixture of, having these passports only for traveling abroad or to very large gatherings, and also just spread message of, passports in that sense.
And Aaron, what are your closing thoughts as you think about this topic? What's the one thing you kind of, you're worried about, or you want people to remember, or perhaps you're even optimistic about, dare I say?
I would say I don't want us to normalize this idea where there is a certain group of people, namely the government, who get to decide on behalf of the public what moral health, or what health morality is and isn't. We've already seen, for example, where countries are allowed to, decide who goes in and out of their country. That's their prerogative. But we've already seen certain airlines that are requiring customers to have vaccines, just for example. And no other mode of public transport requires you to have a vaccine. And you've got an airline that is supposed to take you from A to B.
We seem to have lost Aaron there, but I think the fear he speaks about, and I think he's been mentioning throughout the whole conversation, is this idea of having two systems, right? And having some airlines already saying that this is bad, this isn't working. If you don't live like this, you can't have access to some of these other things. Sorry about the technical issues we've had this week. We've lost quite a few members to them. I hope they're okay. What's important for me to say is, of course, this debate will rage on, and it's interesting what Jamie says about, we've always kind of known this, but it's important. It's really, 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 really important to keep informed in these debates. Busaya was right when she said it before. There's a lot of debates about what if and what's going to happen, but obviously we have to stay informed about what's definitely happening. But also debating what could happen is important, because that's how we kind of work out whether we're going the right way or whether we need to pull back as a country, right? And we are in a very sensitive time. I think that when you have a Conservative Party with unfettered powers, they can pretty much ram through any legislation they want. So it's very important for people to be switched on and to be signing the relevant petitions, making their voices heard. And of course, one of the ways you can do it is by being part of this network. We're always sharing information, helping people stay informed. If you're interested in being part of what we do, it's free. You just go to join, so join, join.tcsnetwork.co.uk, and that way you'll get, newsletters, updates, events, all these amazing things as the world opens, right? Which I'm really looking forward to. And if you're on here, you're listening to this, and you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, then we're on a road to 1,000. It's very difficult to get to 1,000 subscribers. So please do subscribe, turn your notification bell on. And if you want to be a super helper, maybe you've been here for like 2 times now, right? We already appreciate your view. Why don't you copy and paste this link or copy and paste the YouTube link and share it with somebody and have them subscribe as well? That would be very helpful. It would knock us forward 2 places, which is a step closer or 2 steps closer to our 1,000 goal. So please keep helping us, keep sharing this. And of course, there's lots of shows and articles on tcsnetwork.co.uk. Thank you for joining us. And a nod to my fallen soldiers. I don't know where they are. I hope we can reconvene at some stage. But that's it for this week. Thank you all for joining me for this stream, and I will see you all in the next one.